The house was quiet, a deep, contented silence that had become the soundtrack to our 10-year marriage. It was the kind of quiet that spoke of shared comfort, of two lives woven so tightly together that words were often unnecessary. I was in the living room, curled on our plush navy sofa, a half-finished novel resting on my lap. The only light came from a single lamp, casting a warm, golden glow on the room, illuminating the framed photos on the mantelpiece. Our wedding day, a trip to the Amalfi Coast, a candid shot of us laughing in the park. It was a gallery of a happy life, a life I believed was as real and solid as the oak floor beneath my feet. Mark was in his study, a common occurrence for a Tuesday night. As a senior partner at a prestigious architecture firm, his work often bled into our evenings. I never minded. I admired his passion, his dedication. I would hear the soft scratch of his pen on drafting paper, the low hum of his computer, the occasional sigh of concentration. These were the sounds of my husband, the man I loved with a fierce, unwavering certainty. The man who had, 15 years ago, found me shattered and painstakingly helped me piece myself back together. I closed my book, the words blurring before my eyes. A familiar ache, dull but persistent, settled in my chest. It always did when I was tired, when my guard was down. It was the ghost of my brother, Liam. He would have been 32 this year. We would have celebrated with a rowdy family dinner. My parents finally relaxed, watching their two children, all grown up. But Liam was forever 17, a ghost frozen in the amber of a rainy April night. A hit and run. The case went cold faster than his body. The police had no leads, no witnesses, no hope. Mark had entered my life 6 months after that. I was a husk, a walking shadow of the girl I used to be. He was patient, kind, and gentle. He didn't try to fix me or tell me to move on. He simply sat with me in my grief, his quiet presence a lighthouse in my storm. He listened for hours as I talked about Liam, about his stupid jokes and his brilliant smile, about the future that was stolen from him. Mark had never met Liam, but he mourned him with me. He was my rock, my anchor, the foundation upon which I rebuilt my world. A soft thirst pulled me from my reverie. I set my book on the coffee table and padded silently toward the kitchen for a glass of water. Mark's study was at the end of the hall, its heavy oak door usually closed tight when he was on a call. Tonight, however, it was slightly ajar. A sliver of light cutting across the dark hallway floor. I heard his voice, not the calm, measured tone he used with clients, but something else. It was low, tense, and urgent. "You can't do this, Rick." "Not now," he whispered, his voice sharp with a panic I had never heard before. Curiosity, a simple, innocent thing, made me pause. I thought perhaps it was a difficult client or a problem with a project. Rick was his oldest friend, his best man at our wedding. They were as close as brothers. I leaned a little closer, not wanting to eavesdrop but drawn in by the unfamiliar strain in my husband's voice. "I don't care if they're asking questions again," Mark hissed. "It's a cold case. That means it's dead. Buried. They have nothing, you hear me? Absolutely nothing. It's been 15 years. My brow furrowed. A cold case? What were they talking about? Rick was a successful real estate developer and Mark was an architect. Their lives were blueprints and property values, not police inquiries. A flicker of unease, cold and unwelcome, danced down my spine. I told myself I was being ridiculous, that this was some business deal gone sour, some legal jargon I didn't understand. I should have walked away. I should have gone to the kitchen, gotten my water, and returned to the safety of my sofa and my fictional worlds. But I was frozen, rooted to the spot by a sudden, inexplicable dread. "Calm down? How can you tell me to calm down?" Mark's voice rose slightly, a tremor of raw fear running through it. "You think I sleep easy? You think I don't see it every damn night? The rain on the windshield. The bridge, the sound it made. The bridge." The words hung in the air, heavy and menacing. My heart began to beat a little faster. Liam was found near the old Miller's Creek Bridge. "It was an accident, Rick," Mark continued, his voice dropping again, becoming a desperate, pleading whisper. "A stupid, drunken mistake. We were kids. We panicked. We shouldn't have been on that road, we shouldn't have been driving, but we did. And we can't change it now." A wave of nausea washed over me. Drunken mistake. Panicked. My mind was racing, trying to connect dots that I didn't want to connect. It was like trying to solve a puzzle in the dark. My fingers fumbling over sharp, jagged pieces. I thought of an affair, of some financial crime, anything but the terrifying shadow that was beginning to form in the corner of my mind. Couldn't be. It was impossible. Listen to me, Mark said, his tone shifting, becoming hard and commanding. We made a pact. We buried it for a reason. Think about Alara. Think about what this would do to her. After all these years, it would destroy her. We have to keep it buried. For her. For her. For me. The words were meant to be a justification, a shield. But to my ears, they were a death sentence. The puzzle pieces clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening finality. The rainy night. The bridge. The secret. The 15 years. I felt the blood drain from my face. The hallway seemed to tilt, the shadows on the wall warping and stretching like grotesque figures. My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp that was clawing its way up my throat. No. Couldn't be. My Mark. My kind, gentle, loving Mark. The man who held me while I wept for my brother. And then, he spoke the words that shattered my universe. The words that stopped my heart. I know it was her brother, Rick. Don't you think I live with that every single day? Don't you think I know it was Liam? Time stopped. The air in my lungs solidified into a block of ice. My heart didn't just stop instantly, it felt like it had been ripped from my chest, leaving a gaping, black void. Liam. He had said his name. Liam. I couldn't hear anything else. A loud, roaring sound filled my ears, the sound of my own blood pounding in a panicked, desperate rhythm. I stumbled backward, my hand flat against the cool wall, steadying myself. The world was a blur of swimming shapes and distorted light. The man in that room, the man whispering my brother's name as part of a confession, was a stranger. A monster wearing my husband's face. His next words cut through the roaring in my ears, clear and cold as a shard of glass. They were pragmatic, devoid of the grief and remorse I would have expected, filled only with the chilling logic of self-preservation. They were the words that would become the soundtrack to every nightmare I would have for the rest of my life. It's done. We did what we had to do to survive. He's gone. We have to protect what we have now. We have to protect our lives. He wasn't talking about justice. He wasn't talking about atonement. He was talking about protecting himself. Protecting the life he had built with me, a life founded on a lie so monstrous, so profound it defied comprehension. The comfort he had given me wasn't compassion. It was a performance. The tears he had shed with me weren't for my loss, they were for his guilt. His entire presence in my life, the very bedrock of my happiness, was a carefully constructed cage designed to keep his secret safe. I turned and fled, my movements silent and robotic. My feet made no sound on the runner in the hall. I was a ghost in my own home. I slipped back into the living room, my body moving on pure instinct while my mind fractured into a million pieces. I sank onto the sofa, my limbs trembling uncontrollably. The book I had been reading lay forgotten. The photos on the mantelpiece seemed to mock me, their smiling faces a grotesque parody of happiness. Every memory of the past 15 years began to replay in my mind, now tainted, poisoned by this new, horrific truth. I saw Mark at Liam's funeral, his arm wrapped securely around my shoulders, his jaw tight with what I had thought was shared sorrow. Was he looking at my parents' ravaged faces, at my own catatonic grief, and feeling what? Fear? Relief that he hadn't been caught? The thought was so vile it made me want to vomit. I remembered the nights I'd woken up screaming from nightmares, and he would hold me, stroking my hair, murmuring, "It's okay, Alara. I'm here." It was just a dream. He was my comfort from the nightmare he himself had created. He was the monster under the bed pretending to be the one who could scare it away. Years ago, on the 5th anniversary of Liam's death, Mark had suggested we set up a scholarship in his name at the local community college. To honor his memory, he had said, his eyes so sincere. So something good can come from the tragedy. I had wept with gratitude, overwhelmed by his thoughtfulness. Now I saw it for what it was, a penance. A desperate, pathetic attempt to balance the scales of his conscience to buy his way out of hell. He had paid for a few students' educations with the price of my brother's life. My love for him, which had been the one constant, the one undeniable truth in my adult life, evaporated. It didn't fade, it was annihilated, instantly replaced by a feeling so cold and vast it felt like a black hole had opened up inside me. It was a cocktail of pure, undiluted horror and a betrayal so deep it felt like it had rewritten my DNA. I heard the click of his study door opening, followed by his soft footsteps in the hall. My body went rigid. I squeezed my eyes shut, my breath catching in my throat. Be normal. Be asleep. The thought screamed in my head. Ilara? You still up? His voice was soft, back to the familiar, loving tone I knew so well. It was like a physical blow. The ease with which he switched the masks from the panicked conspirator to the doting husband was the most terrifying thing of all. I didn't answer. I kept my breathing slow and even, a Herculean effort of will. I felt the sofa dip as he sat on the edge of the coffee table in front of me. I could feel his warmth, smell his familiar scent of bergamot and cedar. It used to be my favorite smell in the world. Now it smelled of death and lies. Tough day, he murmured, gently brushing a stray strand of hair from my forehead. His touch was electric fire. My skin crawled, recoiled, screamed. Every instinct in my body wanted to flinch away, to scramble to the other side of the room, to shriek at him. But I remained perfectly still, a statue of deceit. I was learning his game already. He sighed softly. You sleep, sweetheart? I'm just going to lock up and head to bed. He kissed my forehead. A Judas kiss. Felt like he was branding me, marking me with his poison. I waited until I heard his footsteps recede, the sound of him checking the locks on the front door, the soft click of the lights being turned off one by one, a methodical shutting down of our shared world. Minutes later, I heard him enter our bedroom. I waited, my muscles screaming with tension, until I felt the bed dip with his weight. He settled in beside me, the man who had shared my bed for 10 years. The man who had murdered my brother. He shifted, his arm draping over my waist, pulling me closer to him in his sleep. It was a familiar, unconscious gesture of affection he did every single night. Tonight, it felt like the bars of a prison cell clamping down around me. I lay there in the dark, my eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. I was trapped. I was lying next to a killer. My protector was my tormentor. My sanctuary was my tomb. And the silence of the house was no longer comforting. It was a living, breathing thing, thick with the unspoken horror of what he had done. It was the silence of the grave Liam was in and the silence of the life I had just lost. The late-night call hadn't just uncovered a betrayal. It had exhumed a body, and in doing so, it had buried me alive. The first slivers of dawn crept through the blinds, casting pale, striped shadows across the room. I hadn't slept. Not for a single second. I had spent the entire night in a state of hypervigilant stillness, listening to the steady, rhythmic breathing of the man beside me. Each exhale was a fresh wave of revulsion. How could he sleep? How could he lie here, in this bed, in this house, and find peace? The question hammered against my skull until it was a raw, throbbing ache. His arm was still draped over me. I imagined it was Liam's hand on my shoulder, not in comfort, but in accusation. You're sleeping with the man who killed me. The thought was so vivid, so visceral, that a sob caught in my throat. I swallowed it down, the taste of bile and grief bitter on my tongue. Slowly, meticulously, I began my escape. I lifted his arm, inch by excruciating inch, my movements so careful they were almost imperceptible. His skin was warm. I remembered a time when that warmth was my only solace. Now it felt like the heat of a fever, the sign of a sickness that had been festering in our lives all along. I finally managed to slide his arm off me and slip out of the bed. My feet hit the cold floor, the shock of it grounding me for a fraction of a second in this new, terrifying reality. I looked at him, asleep in our bed. In the soft morning light, he looked like the same Mark I had loved yesterday. His dark hair was tousled, a faint line of stubble dusting his strong jaw. A stranger looking in would see a peaceful, handsome man. But I saw through the facade. I saw the monster beneath the skin. I saw the scared, drunk kid on a dark bridge, and the cold, calculating man who had hidden the truth for 15 years. My plan had formed in the suffocating darkness of the night. A single, clear purpose crystallizing out of the chaos of my emotions. I needed proof. The overheard phone call was a ghost. It was my word against his and his friend Rick's. I could already hear the denials, the accusations that I was hysterical, that I had misunderstood. They would paint me as a grieving sister, unhinged and paranoid. No, I needed something tangible, something undeniable, something I could hold in my hand and say, this is the truth. His study, the source of the poison. It had to be there. Mark's alarm went off at 6:30 a.m. as it did every weekday. I was already in the kitchen, a cup of coffee in my hands, my back to the door. I had showered and dressed, putting on my own mask of normalcy. Felt heavy and unnatural on my face. "Morning," he said, his voice thick with sleep. He came up behind me and wrapped his arms around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder. I went completely rigid. My coffee cup trembled in my hand, hot liquid sloshing over the rim and scalding my fingers. "Ow," I gasped, more from the shock of his touch than the burn. "Careful," he murmured, his lips brushing against my neck. "You okay? You seem tense." I pulled away, turning to face him, forcing a weak smile. "Just a long night. Didn't sleep well." It was the truest thing I had ever said to him. His brow furrowed with what looked, to the untrained eye, like genuine concern. "Everything all right?" "Fine. Just one of those nights," I said, my voice sounding brittle and foreign to my own ears. "You should get in the shower, you'll be late." He studied my face for a moment longer, and for a terrifying second I thought he could see right through me. I thought he could see the horror and hatred swirling in my eyes. But then he just nodded, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek. I had to fight every muscle in my body not to recoil, and headed for the bathroom. The moment I heard the water running, I moved. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. I had a small window of time. I raced down the hall to his study, my socked feet silent on the floorboards. I closed the door behind me, the soft click echoing like a gunshot in the quiet house. The room smelled of him, of paper and ink and that bergamot and cedar aftershave. The scent was suffocating. I looked around, my eyes scanning every surface. Where would a meticulous man hide a 15-year-old secret? Not in plain sight. It would be somewhere secure, somewhere he thought was safe from prying eyes. I went straight to his desk, a large, antique mahogany piece he'd inherited from his grandfather. I tried the drawers. The top two were unlocked, filled with the mundane detritus of his profession. Pens, paperclips, blueprints, contracts. The bottom right drawer, however, was locked. My heart leaped. This was it. I frantically searched the other drawers for a key. Nothing. I looked in the pen holder, under the desk blotter, in the small decorative box where he kept his business cards. Nothing. The sound of the shower was my ticking clock. I was running out of time. Think, Ilara, think. Where would he hide it? Somewhere close, but not obvious. My eyes scanned the desk again. There was a row of old, leather-bound architecture books on the shelf behind it that he rarely touched, more for decoration than for reading. On a hunch, I pulled one out, the 7 Lamps of Architecture. I shook it. Nothing. I pulled out another and another. On the 4th book, a heavy tome on Roman aqueducts, I felt a slight shift. I opened it. Taped to the inside of the back cover was a small, silver key. My hands were shaking so badly it took me 3 tries to get the key into the lock. Turned with a quiet, solid click. I pulled the drawer open. Inside, there was only one thing, a simple, unadorned wooden box about the size of a shoebox. It was old, the varnish faded in places. I lifted it out and placed it on the desk. My breath was shallow, my lungs tight. This was Pandora's box. I knew that once I opened it, nothing could ever be put back the way it was. With trembling fingers, I lifted the lid. The contents were not what I expected. There was no written confession, no dramatic diary entry. It was far worse. It was a time capsule of his guilt. On top lay a small stack of yellowed newspaper clippings, held together by a rusty paperclip. I recognized the headline immediately. It was from the local paper, dated April 18th, 15 years ago. Local teen killed in tragic hit-and-run. Police seek information. There was a grainy photo of Liam, his school picture, smiling his goofy, wonderful smile. Beneath it was an article detailing the scant facts of the case. Found by a jogger near Miller's Creek Bridge. No witnesses. Car likely had front-end damage. My husband had kept clippings about the boy he killed. He had read these words, looked at this picture, and stored them away like a secret trophy of his survival. Beneath the clippings were a few faded photographs. One was of a much younger Mark and Rick, arms slung around each other, grinning drunkenly at the camera. They were at a party, red plastic cups in their hands. They looked so young, so stupidly invincible. Another photo showed a dark, dented Ford Bronco. The front right headlight was smashed. My blood ran cold. I remembered the police report mentioning that fragments of a headlight from a Ford truck or SUV were found at the scene. And then I saw the last item, nestled in the corner of the box on a bed of what looked like dried, brittle leaves. My breath hitched, a painful, ragged sound in the silent room. It was a keychain. It wasn't just any keychain. It was a small, silver compass, tarnished with age, with the letter L engraved on the back. I had given it to Liam for his 17th birthday, just 2 weeks before he died. "So you'll always find your way home," I had told him. He'd laughed and clipped it to his backpack, the one he was carrying the night he was killed. The police never found it. They had assumed it was lost in the woods, or taken by the river. But it wasn't lost. It was here, in this box, in my husband's desk. He had taken it. Maybe it had gotten caught on the bumper of the truck. Maybe he had gotten out of the car, seen my brother lying there, and in his panic he had picked it up. He hadn't just killed him and driven away. He had stood over his body. He had taken a piece of him. A souvenir. The world dissolved into a pinpoint of white-hot rage. The grief, the shock, the horror, it all coalesced into a single, burning focus. This keychain was my proof. This was the tangible object that connected Mark not just to the crime, but to my brother. I heard the shower shut off. Panic seized me. I quickly but carefully put the photos and clippings back in the box, but I palmed the keychain, its cold, metallic reality a heavy weight in my hand. I closed the box, put it back in the drawer, locked it, and slid the key back into the book, placing it precisely where it had been on the shelf. I closed the study door and was standing back in the hallway just as he opened the bathroom door, a towel wrapped around his waist. "There you are," he said, smiling. "I was starting to think you'd gone back to bed. Just getting something from the linen closet." I lied, my voice steady. The lie came so easily now. I felt the keychain pressing into my palm. A cold, hard secret. The rest of the morning passed in a surreal haze. I watched him get dressed, knot his tie, sip his coffee. He talked about his day, about a meeting with a new client, about plans for the weekend. I nodded and made the appropriate responses, but I wasn't really there. I was on a dark bridge, in a cold car, watching my life shatter. I was a spectator to my own tragedy. When he kissed me goodbye at the door, I didn't flinch. I was a statue. I was ice. "I'll be home around 7, he said. "Maybe we can order in? Thai." "Sure," I said. He looked at me, his smile faltering slightly. "You sure you're okay, Ilara? You seem a million miles away." I met his gaze, my own eyes feeling like chips of glass. "I'm just tired, Mark. I'll see you tonight." He left. I watched his car pull out of the driveway and disappear down the street. The moment he was gone, the facade crumbled. I leaned against the closed door, my legs giving out, and slid to the floor. I opened my hand and stared at the silver compass. Liam's compass. I spent the day in a fugue state. I walked through the rooms of my house, touching the furniture, the picture frames, the life that was no longer mine. Everything was a lie. The comfortable sofa, the beautiful kitchen, the 10 years of laughter and love. It was all the set dressing for a horror movie. My options swirled in my mind. I could go to the police right now, lay the keychain on a detective's desk and tell them everything. It was the right thing to do. It was justice for Liam. But it was also a nuclear bomb. It would incinerate my life, Mark's life, and bring all the pain flooding back for my elderly parents, whose health was already fragile. It was a public agony I wasn't sure any of us could survive. I could just leave, pack a bag, drain half the bank account, and disappear. Leave him to wonder, to live with the fear of discovery forever. But that wasn't justice. That was just running away. Liam deserved more than that. No. There was only one thing I had to do first. I couldn't let the police be the first ones to confront him. I couldn't let him be arrested at his office, a stranger in handcuffs on the evening news. This was personal. This was my brother, my husband, my life. He had to face me. He had to look me in the eye and answer for what he had done. I needed to hear it from his mouth, without the presence of lawyers or police officers. I needed to see the man I had loved confess to being the man who had destroyed me. The hours crawled by. At 6:45 p.m., I saw his headlights sweep across the living room wall. My heart didn't pound. It settled into a cold, heavy lump in my chest. I was ready. I didn't get up to greet him. I sat on the sofa, the same spot where my world had ended the night before. I had arranged the contents of the box on the coffee table in front of me. The newspaper clippings, the photo of the dented Bronco, and in the very center, polished and gleaming under the lamplight, Liam's keychain. He walked in, shrugging off his coat, a smile on his face. "Hey, I'm home. I'm starving. Did you decide on?" He stopped. He saw what was on the table. The smile vanished from his face as if it had been wiped away. The color drained from his cheeks. His briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. He stared at the small, curated collection of his guilt, his eyes wide with a dawning, abject terror. He looked from the keychain to my face, and he saw it all. He knew that I knew. The mask was gone. For the first time, I was seeing the real Mark. A scared, cornered man. "Ilara," he whispered, his voice cracking. "What is this?" "I think you know what it is," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. It was the calmness of the eye of a hurricane. "I think you've known for 15 years. He stumbled forward, his legs unsteady. "Where did you get this?" "From your secret box. In your locked drawer. The one you kept your memories in," I said, my words like ice chips. "Good memories, Mark? Did you look at my brother's picture and remember how you left him to die on the side of the road?" He sank to his knees in front of the coffee table, his face crumbling. "Ilara, please. Let me explain." "Explain?" I let out a short, harsh laugh that held no humor. "Explain what? That you were drunk? That you were scared? That you panicked? I heard you on the phone with Rick last night. I heard the whole explanation. What I want to know is this." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a low, intense whisper. "Did you hold me at my brother's funeral knowing you were the one who put him in that casket? Did you watch my parents wither away from grief, knowing you had the answer to their agony locked in your desk drawer?" Sobs racked his body. He couldn't speak. He just shook his head, tears streaming down his face. They were real tears this time, I thought with a detached coldness. Tears of self-pity. "And the scholarship?" I continued, relentless. "Was that to honor him? Or was it to quiet the ghosts, Mark? A bribe for your own conscience?" "I loved you," he choked out, looking up at me, his eyes pleading. "I fell in love with you, and I was terrified. I was going to tell you so many times, but I couldn't. Couldn't lose you. Everything I did it because I loved you." "Don't," I said, the word sharp as a knife. "Do not use your love for me as an excuse for this monstrosity. You didn't love me. You loved the life you built. You loved the secret you kept. You loved yourself. You took my brother's life, and then you took mine and hollowed it out to make a comfortable place for you to hide." I stood up. The emptiness inside me was absolute. The love was gone. The hate was gone. All that was left was a vast, desolate landscape of what used to be. There was nothing left to salvage. There was only one final, necessary act. I walked to the side table and picked up my phone. He looked up, his face a mask of desperation. "What are you doing?" "Ilara, please. We can figure this out." I looked down at him, this stranger kneeling amidst the wreckage of our lives. There was nothing to figure out. The equation was simple. A life for a life. Not his, but the one he had stolen from me, from my family. The only currency that could even begin to pay that debt was the truth. "Who are you calling?" he begged, scrambling to his feet. I met his terrified gaze with my own, empty and resolute. I pressed the call button. "The police," I said, my voice clear and steady in the silent room. "I'm calling the police, Mark. It's over."